Before we started class, my teacher asked, "Does anyone here know how to deliver a baby?" I raised my hand as a joke. I helped my mom watch YouTube videos when she was pregnant with my brother. Does that count? The class laughed and I smiled, proud of my quick thinking. But Mr. Gonzalez wasn't smiling. His face had gone completely white and his hands were shaking as he gripped the edge of his desk. Good. Come with me. Now. The entire classroom went silent. In South Dallas, when a teacher used that tone, you didn't ask questions. Everyone stay in your seats. Do not leave this room. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, have someone call 911. He was already pulling me toward the door, and that's when I noticed the dark stain on his sleeve. It looked wet. It looked like blood. Mr. Gonzalez, what's happening? Is someone hurt? I tried to pull my arm free, but his grip was iron tight. I don't think I'm qualified for whatever. You're the only one who raised their hand. He cut me off. That makes you qualified. Outside, his car was already running with the doors open. She said she had until Thursday. He kept muttering while speeding out of the school parking lot. The midwife isn't answering her phone. I gripped the door handle, calculating if I could jump out at the next red light. Mr. Gonzalez, you're scaring me. Should I call my mom? No! He swerved around a car and I slammed into the window. No one can know. Put your phone away. Turn it off. I'm not turning off my phone, I shouted. But I did anyway. We were going 50 in a 25 zone, and Mr. Gonzalez kept checking his mirrors like someone was following us. Finally, he pulled into a driveway of a small yellow house that definitely wasn't his. Listen to me! He grabbed my shoulders before we got out. They can't know she was here. Do you understand? No matter what happens, they can't know. I don't understand anything. I was practically yelling now. I'm 17. I don't even have my license yet. Marco. He used my name for the first time, his voice desperate. You've kept bigger secrets than this. I know your family. I need that same silence now. He wasn't wrong. I'd already seen 2 drive-bys this year and never said a word to the cops. But this felt different. He shoved a pair of surgical gloves into my hands. Put these on. The front door was unlocked. Inside, we followed the sound of crying to a back bedroom where a woman was curled up on a bare mattress. She looked young, maybe early 20s, with long black hair stuck to her face with sweat. It's too early, she gasped in accented English when she saw us. Then she looked at me and started crying harder. He's just a child. You brought a child? I'm 17, I said stupidly, like that made any difference. I watch Grey's Anatomy if that helps. She switched to Spanish and started begging Mr. Gonzalez for something I couldn't understand. He pushed me toward her. Check how dilated she is. What? I backed up so fast I knocked over a lamp. I don't know how to do that. I've never even seen a... I can't. Then hold her hand and pretend you know what you're doing, he snapped. That's when I noticed the medical supplies. A whole closet full of them. Some of the boxes were labeled Property of St. Mary's Hospital in red letters. Are those stolen? I heard myself ask. My voice sounded far away. Did you steal from a hospital? No! Both of them shouted at once. The woman grabbed my hand so hard it hurt. Her nails dug into my skin through the gloves. Just don't call the hospital. They'll send me back. My family. She switched to Spanish again, crying about money and payments and someone named Elena. I don't understand. I was crying now too. Someone please tell me what's happening. Mr. Gonzalez was putting on surgical gloves with practiced movements that made me wonder how many times he'd done this before. Check her phone, he ordered me. See if the embassy called. I had to pull the glove off with my teeth. The screen lit up with missed calls and texts. Immigration enforcement had called 6 times in the last hour. There's something here about immigration, I said. My whole body was shaking. They called 6 times. They know, the woman sobbed. Someone told them. The van will come. Someone's looking. I pointed at the window with my bloody hand. The neighbors see us. Get away from the window! Mr. Gonzalez barked at me. I dropped to the floor and crawled to the corner, leaving bloody handprints on the carpet. To the woman, he spoke softly in Spanish, checking how dilated she was. She's at 9 centimeters, he said. You need to help me. I don't know what that means. If they find out about the surrogacy, the woman gasped between contractions, they'll deport me before I get the money for it. My daughter needs surgery. Please, you promise to help. Surrogacy? The word clicked in my brain. This isn't your baby? She shook her head, tears streaming. China baby, for China parents. The contractions were getting closer together. She grabbed my bloody hand and pulled me down to her face. Baby coming now! She screamed so loud my ears rang, and then everything happened at once. The baby's head pushed out first, all wet and covered in white stuff, and Mr. Gonzalez yelled at me to catch it. I put my shaking hands under the tiny head, just as the shoulders came out, and then the whole baby slid into my hands in a rush of blood and clear fluid that splashed all over my jeans. The baby was so slippery, I almost dropped it, but Mr. Gonzalez grabbed my wrists and guided me to lift it up to the woman's chest. It wasn't crying, though. The skin looked purple like a bruise, and the tiny chest wasn't moving right. Mr. Gonzalez started rubbing the baby's back really hard with a towel, while I held it against the woman who was sobbing and trying to see if it was okay. He rubbed harder and harder, until finally the baby made this weak little cough, and then started crying. The woman started thanking God over and over in Spanish, while tears ran down her face, and she kissed the baby's slimy head. But then I noticed the blood. It was pooling under her way too fast, soaking through the towels we'd put down and spreading across the mattress. Mr. Gonzalez saw it too, and his face went completely white. He grabbed more towels and pressed them between her legs, but they turned bright red in seconds. I ran to the bathroom and grabbed every towel I could find while he pushed down on her stomach trying to massage it or something. The woman's eyes started rolling back, and she was mumbling about her daughter needing her, saying the same name over and over. The baby was breathing now, but making these weird grunting sounds like it couldn't get enough air. Its color wasn't getting much better even though it was crying, still looking kind of blue around the lips. I tried wiping its face with a wet cloth while Mr. Gonzalez kept pressing towels against the bleeding, but nothing was working. That's when someone started pounding on the front door so hard the whole house shook. A man's voice yelled that he was calling the cops if we didn't open up right now. Mr. Gonzalez told me to ignore it, but I could see through the bedroom window that the neighbor was standing on the porch holding up his phone like he was recording everything. The woman grabbed my wrist with fingers covered in blood and pulled me close to her face. She begged me not to let them take the baby before she got paid, saying Elena promised the money would be ready today for her daughter's surgery. Her grip was weak, and her skin felt cold and clammy. Mr. Gonzalez's phone started ringing, and he answered it with one bloody hand while still pressing towels with the other. It was the midwife saying she was 5 minutes away but stuck in traffic on the highway. He started telling her about the bleeding, and she was giving him instructions, but I couldn't follow what they were saying because it was all medical terms I didn't understand. I wrapped the baby in the cleanest towel I could find, and that's when I noticed the umbilical cord was still attached and pulsing with each heartbeat. Mr. Gonzalez hung up and handed me surgical scissors from the medical supplies, pointing to a spot about 3 inches from the baby's belly where I needed to cut. My hands were shaking, so bad I could barely hold the scissors steady. He had to put his hands over mine to guide them, while I squeezed the handles and cut through the thick, rubbery cord. More blood gushed from between the woman's legs, the second I cut it, and she went completely limp. Her head rolled to the side, and her eyes closed. Mr. Gonzalez dropped everything and started slapping her face, trying to wake her up while yelling her name. I held the baby against my chest, and it was finally starting to turn more pink, its little fists opening and closing while it cried. The neighbor was still pounding on the door, and now I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. Mr. Gonzalez kept trying to wake the woman up, but she wasn't responding at all. Blood was everywhere, soaking into the carpet and dripping onto the floor. The baby's cries were getting stronger, but the woman wasn't moving, and I didn't know what to do except hold this tiny person who wasn't supposed to be born yet, while everything fell apart around us. The front door slammed open so hard it bounced off the wall, and a woman rushed in carrying a black medical bag that looked beat up and old. She had gray hair pulled back in a messy bun and was already pulling on gloves as she pushed past Mr. Gonzalez, who jumped out of her way. Her name tag said Maribel, and she dropped to her knees next to the unconscious woman without saying anything to us. She pressed 2 fingers against the woman's neck while reaching into her bag with the other hand and pulling out a plastic bag full of clear liquid with tubes attached. Her movements were fast but steady, like she'd done this 100 times before. She hung the bag from a nail sticking out of the wall and started looking for a vein in the woman's arm while Mr. Gonzalez held up a flashlight he found somewhere. The baby kept crying against my chest, and I could feel its tiny heartbeat through the towel. Maribel stuck the needle in on her first try to tape it down with medical tape from her bag. She looked at all the blood soaking into the mattress and shook her head. She told Mr. Gonzalez they needed an ambulance right now, because this was way worse than what she could handle here. He started arguing about immigration and how they couldn't go to a hospital, but Maribel cut him off, saying the woman would die without real doctors. She grabbed his phone from his hand and shoved it at him. I pulled out my own phone with one hand while still holding the baby and dialed 911 before anyone could stop me. The dispatcher answered, and I gave her the address while Mr. Gonzalez glared at me like I'd betrayed him. She said units were already on the way because of multiple neighbor complaints about screaming. The sirens got louder and louder until they were right outside, and then there was pounding on the door with someone yelling that they were police and to open up immediately. Maribel yelled back that it was a medical emergency and to let the paramedics through first. The door flew open, and 2 cops came in with hands on their guns, but then stepped aside when they saw the blood. 2 paramedics rushed in carrying a yellow stretcher and a bunch of equipment in red bags. They went straight to the woman and started working on her, while one of them looked around at all the medical supplies stacked against the wall. He made eye contact with his partner, and I saw them both notice the hospital labels on the boxes. A female cop came over to me while the paramedics were getting the woman ready to move and started asking what happened here. I told her I was just a student, and my teacher brought me here. and I didn't know anything about any of this. She kept asking questions about whose house this was and why I was covered in blood and holding a baby. The paramedics lifted the woman onto the stretcher, and one of them was squeezing a bag attached to a mask over her face while the other one pushed on her stomach. Mr. Gonzalez tried explaining to the cop that he was helping a family friend, but she was already looking at the medical supplies and talking into her radio about needing a supervisor at this location. The paramedics started wheeling the woman out, and Maribel grabbed her medical bag, saying she was riding with them to the hospital. She pointed at me and told me to bring the baby, because it needed to be checked too. The female cop said I could go, but Mr. Gonzalez had to stay and answer more questions. He looked defeated as another cop started asking him about the supplies while pointing at the hospital labels. I followed Maribel out to the ambulance, still holding the baby, who was crying less now but still making little whimpering sounds. They lifted the stretcher into the back, and Maribel climbed in first, then reached down to help me up. The inside was all white with machines and drawers everywhere, and barely enough room to move around. One paramedic stayed in the back with us while the other went to drive. As soon as we started moving, the woman's eyes opened for a second and she started trying to sit up. She was asking about the baby and the money in Spanish and reaching for me with weak hands. Maribel leaned over her and told her in Spanish to be quiet about the surrogacy and just focus on staying alive. The woman kept trying to talk, but Maribel put her hand over her mouth and shook her head. The paramedic was adjusting something on the IV and watching the woman's vital signs on a screen. He looked at me and asked how old I was and why I was covered in blood. I told him I was 17, and my teacher made me help deliver this baby, and he stopped what he was doing to stare at me. He grabbed his radio and called the hospital saying they had a minor involved in the situation who might need evaluation. The woman grabbed my arm with fingers that felt cold and weak and kept whispering Elena's name over and over. The ambulance hit a bump, and equipment rattled in the cabinets while the baby started crying harder again. Maribel took the baby from me to check it over while I held the woman's hand and tried not to look at all the blood on my clothes. The ambulance pulled into the emergency bay, and everything started happening really fast. The paramedics lowered the stretcher, while one kept squeezing the bag attached to the woman's face, and nurses came running out to meet us. They wheeled her straight through double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only," while another nurse grabbed the baby from Maribel and rushed it to a different area. I followed behind, not knowing where else to go, and my shoes were making wet sounds from all the blood. The nurse with the baby put it on a small table under bright lights and started hooking up tubes to its tiny nose. She kept checking its chest and saying something about fluid in the lungs to another nurse who was writing stuff down. The baby's skin still looked kind of purple, and it was making these weak crying sounds that didn't sound right. They put this plastic dome thing over it and turned on machines that started beeping. Meanwhile, through the window, I could see them wheeling the woman into what looked like an operating room, with tons of people in scrubs rushing around. Maribel stayed with the baby while I stood in the hallway not knowing what to do with my bloody hands. A guy in a suit came walking fast down the hall looking at a clipboard and stopped when he saw us. He started asking Maribel about insurance cards and identification for the patient. Maribel pulled him aside, and I heard her explaining that the woman didn't have papers, and this was a complicated situation involving surrogacy. The suit guy's face got all tight, and he started making notes while shaking his head. He kept asking who was going to pay for all this, and Maribel kept saying it was an emergency, and they had to treat her first. My phone started buzzing in my pocket, and I pulled it out with shaking fingers, leaving blood smears on the screen. Mom had sent like 20 texts because the school called saying I left with Mr. Gonzalez during class. I typed back that I was okay, but at the hospital, which made her start calling immediately. I sent another text saying I'd explain later, but I was fine, and she sent back about 50 question marks and angry emojis. The suit guy was still arguing with Maribel when this Asian woman came running up asking about a baby. She had a folder full of papers and kept saying she was a family friend who needed to see the infant right away. The nurses at the desk looked confused and asked for her ID while she kept waving the papers saying she had legal documents. She was talking really fast about contracts and biological parents and time-sensitive medical decisions. The nurses called security because she was getting loud and demanding to know where they took the baby. Maribel came over and told them this was probably connected to our situation, but they still wouldn't let the woman through without proper authorization. That's when this Indian woman in business clothes showed up with a hospital badge that said "Social Services" and asked what was happening. The nurses pointed at me and Maribel and said we came in with an emergency birth, and now this other woman was claiming rights to the baby. The social worker, her badge said Pooja, pulled me aside to a quiet corner and asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I told her about Mr. Gonzalez pulling me out of class and the woman giving birth and the surrogacy thing and the immigration calls. Her eyes got wider as I talked, and she kept writing notes and asking me to slow down. She said this was way more complicated than a normal abandoned baby case, and she needed to make some calls. The Asian woman, who said her name was May, followed us and kept trying to show Pooja her papers. While Pooja was on her phone, May grabbed my arm and pulled me into an empty room. She opened her folder and showed me contracts with signatures and medical records and bank statements showing wire transfers. She said the biological parents were her clients from China, and they'd paid a lot of money for this baby and had legal rights to it. She pulled out her wallet and started counting $100 bills, saying she'd give me $5,000 right now if I helped her get the baby released to her. She said all I had to do was tell the social worker that the birth mother wanted the baby to go with her and sign as a witness. Her hands were shaking as she held out the money and kept looking at the door like she was scared someone would come in. I pulled out my phone and pretended to check my texts, but actually started recording video. She didn't notice because she was too busy explaining how the surrogacy agency worked and how much money was involved. She said the parents had already paid $200,000 and were waiting at a hotel nearby, and the baby had to be delivered today or they'd lose everything. She kept pushing the money at me and saying I'd be helping everyone by making this happen. She explained how they brought women from poor countries and promised them $50,000 for carrying babies, but only if everything went perfectly. She said this woman was going to get deported anyway, so at least the baby should go to its real parents who wanted it. The door opened, and Pooja came in looking mad. She told May that no infant could be released from the hospital until the birth mother was stable and all legal issues were resolved. May started yelling about lawyers and lawsuits and how the hospital had no right to keep the baby. Pooja stayed calm and said the baby was a patient too and needed medical care, and they'd follow proper procedures. May stormed out with her phone already at her ear, talking to someone about getting lawyers there immediately. A doctor in bloody scrubs came out to the waiting area and found Maribel. He said the woman made it through surgery, but she'd lost a dangerous amount of blood and needed intensive care. She had something called uterine atony, where her uterus wouldn't contract after delivery, and she almost bled out. He said she'd need to stay in the ICU for at least a week, and maybe longer depending on complications. This made everything worse because now there was no way to sort out the baby situation quickly. That's when a white guy in a dark suit walked up to the nurse's station and showed his badge. He said his name was Dean Ford from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and he was looking for an undocumented woman who'd given birth. The nurses looked uncomfortable and called for Pooja, who came out immediately. She stepped between Ford and the desk and explained that the woman was a patient receiving emergency medical care and couldn't be questioned or detained while she was treated. Ford said he just needed to confirm her identity and started asking about the baby's status. Pooja told him that was confidential medical information and he'd need a warrant to access any records. He looked annoyed, but pulled out his phone to make a call while standing right there watching us. My phone started buzzing in my pocket, and I saw Mom's name on the screen but couldn't answer with Ford standing right there. The automatic doors whooshed open, and my mom came running through the entrance with her work badge still hanging around her neck from the bank. She saw me sitting there covered in dried blood, and her face went from scared to angry to scared again in about 2 seconds. She grabbed my shoulders and started checking me for injuries while asking what happened over and over. I tried to explain, but the words came out all jumbled, and then I was crying into her shoulder while she held me tight. She smelled like her vanilla lotion and coffee, and I realized how bad I must have looked because she kept touching the blood on my shirt and hands. Mom spotted Pooja coming out of the ICU doors and marched straight over, dragging me with her. She wanted to know if I was in trouble with the law and if she needed to call our cousin, who was a lawyer. Pooja explained that I was a witness who'd been forced into the situation by my teacher and actually saved lives by calling 911. Mom's grip on my arm relaxed a little, but she still looked ready to fight someone. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Gonzalez saying the police let him go, but the school suspended him while they investigated everything. He apologized for getting me involved and said he'd make sure everyone knew I was forced to help. I showed Mom the text, and she took my phone away, saying I wasn't talking to him anymore. A nurse came out and told Pooja they were moving the baby to NICU because its breathing wasn't stable enough for the regular nursery. May tried to follow the nurse, but security stepped in front of her, asking for ID and proof she was family. She started waving papers around, but the guard just shook his head and pointed her back to the waiting area. Pooja pulled me and Mom into a small conference room where she explained that the woman might qualify for a special visa if she cooperated with authorities about the surrogacy network. She said it was called a U visa for victims of crimes and could stop her from being deported while also getting medical help for her daughter. Mom kept interrupting with questions about whether I'd be charged with anything, but Pooja kept saying I was the victim here, not a criminal. Ford knocked on the door and came in with a recording device asking if he could interview me about what happened. Mom said not without a lawyer, but Ford explained he wasn't interested in prosecuting me, or even the woman, really. He wanted information about the network bringing women here for illegal surrogacy arrangements. I told him everything from when Mr. Gonzalez pulled me out of class to delivering the baby to the ambulance ride. He asked specific questions about the medical supplies and whether I'd seen other women at the house before. Mom held my hand the whole time and squeezed it when Ford asked about the money May offered me. I pulled out my phone and showed him the secret recording I made of her explaining the whole arrangement. His eyes got wide, and he asked me to send him the file immediately. Outside the conference room, we could hear loud voices, and when we came out, there were 3 people in suits arguing with the hospital administrator. May was with them pointing at papers and talking about contracts and legal obligations. One of the lawyers was saying the intended parents had rights to their biological child and the hospital couldn't keep them from it. The hospital's lawyer showed up and started explaining that contracts for illegal activities weren't valid under state law. They were using big legal words I didn't understand, but basically saying nobody could enforce a contract for something that was already against the law. The arguing got louder until security had to step between them. Pooja got a call that the woman was awake in ICU and asking about the baby and the money. She asked Maribel to come translate while she explained the options, including the visa possibility. The woman started crying when she heard she might not get deported, but kept asking if the baby was okay and if she'd still get money for her daughter's surgery. Pooja said they were working on it, but nothing was guaranteed yet. I felt my phone buzzing in Mom's purse, and when she wasn't looking, I grabbed it back. There were like 50 notifications from Instagram and Snapchat, and when I opened them, I saw why. Colt had posted the video he took through the window, and it already had thousands of views. The caption said, "Teen delivers baby during immigration raid in South Dallas," which wasn't even close to what really happened. People from the school were sharing it and tagging me, asking if it was real. Some comments called me a hero, while others said I was helping criminals. Mom saw me looking at my phone and took it away again, but not before I saw an email from the school district. They sent it to all parents saying they were aware of the situation and that Mr. Gonzalez's actions didn't represent the district's values. They said he was suspended pending investigation, and students who witnessed him leaving with me would get counseling if needed. My classmates kept trying to text me, but Mom turned my phone completely off and put it in her purse. She said I wasn't dealing with any of this until we figured out the legal stuff. Ford came back over and said he needed me to come to his office tomorrow to give a formal statement, but promised again that I wasn't in trouble. Mom said we'd be there, but only with a lawyer present. The chaos in the waiting room kept getting worse, with more lawyers showing up, and reporters starting to gather outside after seeing the viral video. Maribel pulled Pooja into a corner and started showing her a thick folder she'd been carrying in her bag. I watched them flip through pages and pages of handwritten notes with dates and names, while the chaos kept getting worse around us. The folder had photos of women and babies paperclipped to medical forms that looked official, but weren't from any hospital. Maribel kept pointing at different pages and explaining something while Pooja's eyes got wider and wider. She counted at least 40 different cases over 2 years where they'd helped women who couldn't go to real hospitals. Some of the papers showed amounts of money crossed out and recalculated lower when families couldn't pay the full amount. Ford walked over and asked to see the documentation too, taking photos of each page with his phone. He pulled the woman's doctor aside and they talked for a long time near the ICU doors, while a nurse kept checking on the woman inside. When Ford came back, he went straight to the woman's bed and sat down next to her, with Maribel translating everything he said. He explained that if she testified about the whole surrogacy network and how they recruited her, he could get her something called deferred action that would stop the deportation. The woman kept asking about her daughter's surgery money and if they could guarantee she'd get it before agreeing to anything. Ford made some calls and came back saying they could work with the district attorney to make sure any money recovered went to medical expenses first. The woman nodded and squeezed Maribel's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. Meanwhile, the hospital administrator kept coming by with new papers about the mounting bills that nobody had signed for yet. The emergency surgery alone was $30,000, and the NICU stay was adding up to $5,000 per day. Pooja grabbed the papers and started filling out emergency Medicaid applications on her laptop, while May kept insisting the intended parents would cover everything once they arrived. The administrator said they needed payment guarantees within 48 hours, or they'd have to transfer the woman to the county hospital. Mom called her friend who was a lawyer, and he showed up within an hour wearing a suit that looked expensive. We went to a conference room, where 2 detectives were waiting with a recorder and lots of forms to sign. The lawyer read through everything first and crossed out parts he didn't like before letting me talk. I told them exactly what happened from the joke in class to calling 911 while the woman was bleeding out. They asked me the same questions different ways, but my story stayed the same because it was the truth. The lawyer kept interrupting when they asked about what I knew before that day, saying I was a minor who was coerced. After 3 hours, they finally said they weren't charging me with anything, since I was forced to help and actually saved lives by calling for help. The detective said I might have to testify later if there was a trial, but for now, I was free to go. We went back to check on the baby, and the nurse said she was doing better and might be able to leave NICU in a few days. The woman hadn't seen her since the birth because she'd been too sick, but now they wheeled her down in a wheelchair to the NICU window. She pressed her hand against the glass and started crying when she saw the tiny baby hooked up to monitors, but breathing on her own. The nurse asked if she wanted to hold her, and the woman nodded, even though her hands were shaking. They helped her put on a gown and mask before bringing her inside where she held the baby against her chest for the first time. She kept whispering to her in Spanish and crying while the baby grabbed her finger with a tiny fist. After 20 minutes, they said she had to go back to her room, but she could visit again tomorrow. May showed up with more lawyers, and they cornered Pooja in the hallway with proposals about the money. They wanted to put the surrogacy payment in something called escrow that would only release funds once certain conditions were met. Pooja said that wasn't ideal, but it would guarantee the woman got something for her daughter's surgery instead of nothing. The lawyers drew up papers that said half the money would go directly to the daughter's medical providers and half would be held until after the woman testified. May didn't like it, but agreed because she needed to show the intended parents she was handling the situation. Her phone kept ringing with calls from China that she took outside. The next morning, Mom showed me a text from the school saying Mr. Gonzalez was meeting with the board about the stolen medical supplies. He'd admitted to taking them from the hospital where he volunteered, thinking expired supplies were just thrown away anyway. The board said he broke their trust and multiple laws, even if his intentions were good. Someone from the woman's family brought her daughter to visit, and I saw her for the first time through the door window. She was maybe 6 years old, and so skinny you could see her bones through her hospital gown. She had some kind of tube in her nose and moved real slow, like every step hurt. When she saw her mom, she tried to run, but could only manage small steps before having to stop and catch her breath. They hugged for a long time, and the woman kept touching her daughter's face and hair like she was making sure she was real. The little girl asked when they were going home, and the woman just held her tighter without answering. Seeing her sick kid made the woman tell Ford she'd do whatever it took to get the surgery money, even if it meant testifying against everyone. By afternoon, the local news vans were setting up outside, and protesters started showing up with signs. Some held "No one is illegal" posters, while others had "Deport all criminals" written in red paint. Hospital security had to create a barrier to keep them from blocking the emergency room entrance. The arguing between the two groups got so loud we could hear it from inside. Then May got a call that made her face go white, and she ran to find Pooja. The intended parents had landed at the airport, but immigration was holding them for questioning about the surrogacy arrangement. They had visitor visas, but the officers found documentation about the baby in their bags and wanted to know if they were trying to traffic a child. May was screaming into her phone in English and Mandarin trying to explain, while also calling the lawyers to meet them at the airport. She kept saying her commission depended on delivering the baby to them, and she'd already spent part of it. The parents were demanding to see their biological child, but immigration wouldn't release them without more investigation into whether the surrogacy contract was legal. Everything was falling apart faster than anyone could fix it. Pooja walked into the room holding a stack of papers and told the woman she'd found lawyers who work with trafficking victims. The lawyers came that afternoon and sat with the woman for 3 hours, going through everything while I waited outside, watching nurses rush past with clipboards. They kept asking her about promises made and money owed and how she got into the country, taking notes on yellow legal pads while she cried through most of it. The lawyers said she had a good case since she was basically forced into this whole thing when her daughter got sick and someone offered her a way to pay for treatment. Ford showed up while they were talking and waited in the hallway, checking his phone every few minutes. When the lawyers came out, they told him the woman would cooperate, but only if they guaranteed her daughter could get the surgery first. Ford made some calls, and within an hour, there was paperwork saying the government would help with medical costs if she testified about the network. 3 days later, Mom finally let me go back to the school, but walking through those doors felt wrong. Everyone stared at me in the hallway and whispered to each other when I passed. Some kids came up saying I was a hero for saving that woman and baby, but others called me a snitch for getting Mr. Gonzalez arrested. I just wanted to eat my lunch without people asking questions about what really happened in that house. The woman was still in the hospital when Pooja brought more papers for her to sign about giving up the baby. She held that little girl for an hour before signing, kissing her tiny forehead and whispering prayers in Spanish while tears ran down her face. The intended parents were still stuck at immigration, but their lawyers were working on getting them cleared. May kept calling the hospital trying to speed things up because she needed her commission, but Pooja wouldn't let her near the baby without proper authorization. Ford's investigation was getting bigger every day, with more women coming forward saying they'd been promised money for carrying babies, then threatened with deportation if they didn't cooperate. His office had files stacked to the ceiling, and he kept bringing in more agents to help interview everyone. The news was calling it the biggest trafficking case in Texas, but Ford said it was just the tip of what was really going on. Mr. Gonzalez met with prosecutors and agreed to plead guilty to stealing medical supplies in exchange for no jail time. He'd lose his teaching license and have to do 500 hours of community service plus pay back the hospital for everything he took. When I saw him at the courthouse, he looked older and wouldn't make eye contact with me. His lawyer said he was trying to help people the only way he knew how, but that didn't make stealing right. The hospital's social workers managed to get some of the money from the trafficking network frozen by the courts and set up a fund for medical costs. It wasn't the full amount the woman was promised, but it was enough to start her daughter's surgery and treatments. The little girl came to visit her mom again, and this time she looked a bit stronger, walking without help and eating solid food. They hugged for so long the nurses had to remind them visiting hours were ending. 2 weeks after everything started, the woman was finally well enough to leave the hospital. Immigration put her in a protective facility where she could have her daughter visit while she helped with the investigation. The place looked like a regular apartment building from outside, but had security guards and cameras everywhere. She had to check in 3 times a day and couldn't leave without an escort, but at least she wasn't in detention. The baby's intended parents finally got cleared by immigration after their lawyers proved the surrogacy contract was made before all the illegal stuff started. They came to the hospital with May to pick up the baby and left for the airport right away. May got her payment and disappeared that same day, probably scared she'd get arrested too if she stuck around. Nobody heard from her again, but Ford said they were still looking for her. Maribel kept her clinic open, but now with proper licenses and oversight from the health department. She hired real nurses and translators so people could understand what was happening with their care. The state even gave her a grant to partner with local hospitals, so nobody would need underground medical help anymore. She said what happened with the woman was a wake-up call, that the system needed to change. I started going to Maribel's clinic after school to help with paperwork and translation, since I spoke both English and Spanish. It felt better than sitting at home thinking about everything that happened. Plus, helping people fill out forms and understand their appointments was safer than delivering babies in random houses. Mom wasn't happy about it at first, but Maribel promised I'd just be doing office work, nothing medical. The other volunteers taught me how to file insurance claims and schedule appointments while making sure people understood their rights. Some days we'd see 50 people who just needed basic help navigating the system. Most of them were scared of getting deported if they went to regular hospitals, so they came to us first. Maribel made sure everyone knew they could get emergency care, no matter their status, but old fears don't go away easy. Every week, more people heard about the clinic and came looking for help with everything from diabetes to pregnancy care to getting their kids vaccinated for school. 6 months passed before the letter came about the woman's visa getting approved. She could stay while testifying against the trafficking ring that brought her here. Her daughter's surgery happened 2 weeks after that at the same hospital where everything went down. The doctors fixed whatever was wrong with her heart, and she stayed in recovery for 3 weeks. I visited them once when Mom drove me there after my shift at the clinic. The little girl was sitting up in bed coloring pictures while machines beeped around her. The woman grabbed my hand when she saw me and kept saying thank you over and over in Spanish. They moved into this small apartment near the hospital that some charity helped them get. The place had 2 bedrooms and actual furniture, which was way better than wherever they were staying before. Mr. Gonzalez started working at a nonprofit downtown that teaches citizenship classes to immigrants. I saw him at the clinic sometimes when he brought his students for health screenings. We'd nod at each other, but never really talked about that day with the baby and all the blood. He looked different now, wearing regular clothes instead of teacher clothes, and his hands didn't shake anymore. Mom made me start seeing this therapist lady who had an office near our house. She kept asking how I felt about what happened, and if I had bad dreams. I told her about waking up sometimes thinking my hands were covered in blood again. She said that was normal after trauma, and taught me breathing exercises that actually helped. The nightmares got less frequent after a few months, though sometimes I'd still wake up sweating and have to check my hands. The woman opened a small alteration shop with help from some refugee program that gives loans to immigrants. The place was tiny, just 1 room, with sewing machines and fabric everywhere, but she seemed happy working there. Her daughter started going to the elementary school down the street and looked healthier every time I saw them. The girl could run around now without getting tired, and her lips weren't blue anymore. Agent Ford got promoted to some bigger job in the trafficking division after breaking up that whole network. He sent me this official letter thanking me for my cooperation in the investigation. It felt weird getting thanked by ICE when they're usually the ones my neighborhood tries to avoid. Mom framed the letter anyway and put it on the wall next to my graduation photo. I graduated high school that spring with plans to study nursing at the community college. Watching Maribel save that woman's life made me realize I could handle medical stuff even when it got scary. The whole experience was horrible, but it showed me I wanted to help people the right way, with actual training and licenses. My guidance counselor helped me apply for financial aid, and I got enough grants to cover most of the tuition. Summer before college started, I worked full-time at Maribel's clinic doing intake and helping with insurance paperwork. One day this package arrived with my name on it. Inside was a photo of the woman's daughter playing soccer in a bright pink uniform. The girl was running after the ball with this huge smile on her face, looking like any other healthy kid. The woman had written on the back in careful English letters that must have taken her forever to get right. It said, "Thank you for saving us both," with a little heart drawn next to it. I kept that photo in my wallet when I started college that fall. Life felt normal again with classes and homework and hanging out with new people who didn't know about the whole baby delivery thing. But I was different now, more serious about actually doing something useful with my life. I kept volunteering at Maribel's clinic on weekends because there was always more work to do. New families showed up every week needing help with medical stuff they were too scared to get at regular hospitals. Some of them heard about what happened with the woman and the baby and figured if we helped her, maybe we could help them too. Maribel hired 2 more nurses and got another grant to expand the clinic into the empty store next door. The state health department even sent inspectors who said everything was up to code now. She told me once that what happened that day was the worst and best thing, because it forced everyone to stop hiding and start fixing the real problems. I kept Ford's number saved in my phone even though I never called it. Same with the woman's shop address, though I only went there once to get some pants hemmed. Mr. Gonzalez sent me a text when I was accepted to nursing school, saying he was proud of me. Mom still worried about me working at the clinic, but she could see it made me feel like I was doing something that mattered. The woman's daughter turned 8 that year, and the woman sent another photo of her blowing out candles on a birthday cake. She looked completely healthy now, just a regular kid living a regular life, which is all her mom ever wanted for her. I really appreciate you sticking with me through all the questions and curiosity today. It means a lot to share these moments with you. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.